One of the strongest problems that utilitarianism faces is its permitting of using individuals merely as a means to secure the best consequences. If slavery of a few brought about the most happiness, then slavery of the few is morally permissible. If sacrificing everyone to a utility monster led to the greatest maximizing of utility, then we ought to sacrifice everyone. It's not individuals who have value under utilitarianism. Instead, it's utility. Some attempts have been made to amend these problems, but the problems still persist. The focus of this video specifically will be about the problems this consequentialist theory generates in the domain of animal ethics. In particular, I'll be looking at the views of Peter Singer concerning the argument for marginal cases and the replaceability argument. The argument for marginal cases is roughly about the moral inconsistency in permitting certain acts toward some non-human animals while not permitting the very same acts toward those humans who possess the same morally relevant properties as non-human animals to either an equal or lesser degree. For example, one might suggest it's permissible to send cows to slaughterhouses because they lack moral agency. However, if one would not also permit sending humans who lack moral agency to slaughterhouses, then one is being inconsistent. Singer is, of course, a proponent of the argument for marginal cases. Along with the argument for marginal cases, Singer has another argument to raise, the replaceability argument. Here, Singer argues that it would be permissible, if it does not lead to less utility, to painlessly kill and replace any animals, which includes humans if the argument for marginal cases is sound, who lack the capacity to be aware of their past and future. Another constraint on who cannot so easily be replaced is the ability to be self-aware, which often goes with having a concept of one's future. Because they have no concept of their future, they cannot be morally wronged if they are killed painlessly. They are not deprived of a future they long for, and any lost utility that would be generated by their future selves will be made up by their replacements. While this sounds like something coming from an agribusiness think tank, it's more of Singer being a consistent utilitarian and being influenced by the likes of Jeremy Bentham, who also thought there was no wrong committed in painlessly killing animals. Strangely enough, if feasible on a mass scale, then Singer would be living in a world where he would have to defend the mass slaughtering and replacing of animals that's being done simply because people like the taste of their flesh. Fortunately for him and his vegan fans, he can ostensibly sidestep this problem. But even if Singer and his defenders ignore this conclusion because it doesn't practically manifest, we're still left dealing with its problems in theory. According to Singer's replaceability argument, and his acceptance of the soundness of the argument for marginal cases, he has to permit the painless killing and replacing of humans who lack certain cognitive capacities. As Daniel Dombrowski puts it, quote, "If morally undeveloped animals are replaceable, so are human beings with comparative characteristics in like circumstances. According to Singer, no wrong is done if mentally undeveloped animals are killed painlessly and are replaced with conspecifics. But neither would a wrong be done to mental defectives who are raised and killed painlessly, had their flesh stocked for food or experimentation purposes, and were replaced with conspecifics." It should be noted that the problem here is not with the argument for marginal cases, but with Singer's attempt to link it to the replaceability argument. Hence, if we shudder at the prospect of canning moron meat, we would do well to withdraw consent to the replaceability argument. For the argument for marginal cases in itself carries no implication that marginal cases may be treated thus." End quote. Perhaps unsurprisingly, we can also see similar reasoning underpinning Singer's claim of the permissibility and perhaps even obligatory nature of killing and replacing some children who have Down syndrome. A further problem for Singer is whether his criteria of those who cannot be permissibly so easily replaced actually holds. That is, does it just stop at those humans who share similar cognitive capacities with some non-human animals? While Singer's views have changed somewhat since its publication, this point was briefly brought up in Julian H. Franklin's book, Animal Rights and Moral Philosophy, which will serve to close out this video. Preference utilitarians hold that the element to be considered in measuring the well-being of an individual is not felt pleasure or pain, but rather the satisfaction or frustration of his or her preferences. Humans, endowed with self-consciousness as they are, can alone have a conscious preference for life as such. And so it is that humans, and humans only, suffer loss from death, even if that death is painless. You can therefore kill a chicken if the death is painless, and there is no loss of aggregate utility from the act if you replace the chicken you have killed with another chicken having the same utility index. So to permit the killing of animals for food, under very special conditions, of course, cannot be used to justify killing innocent humans and replacing them. But the implications of preference utilitarianism, as Singer invokes it, notoriously do not end there. Infants, like chickens and coyotes, cannot be said to have a conscious preference for life. Infanticide, accordingly, is not only permissible if the infant killed is replaced by another with roughly the same utility index. It would often be mandatory in that replacement of a deformed child with a healthy one may be a gain in utility. Besides, a deformed child, if it is allowed to live, may not find positive utility in its future existence. There are numerous difficulties with preference utilitarianism, some of which seem fatal to the whole idea. We may begin with a practical absurdity. Along with a preference for life, an individual will have many desires for self-realization in the future. Are we pledged to honor these if the individual dies suddenly of a natural cause? Animals, furthermore, indicate a fear of death and a preference for life by their cries and behavior. They surely moan when they are being led to slaughter, and this cannot simply be attributed to their fear of pain. Finally, consider that once a human individual is dead, it is extremely hard to understand how he or she can experience the disappointment of a preference for life now that the life is over. Another way of putting this difficulty is to ask why one entity with a preference for life may not be replaced by another entity which also has a roughly similar preference for life. And so, like chickens, like people.